Hi, everyone. Welcome to the School of Reinvention podcast. I am your host, Roger Osorio. I help parents in corporate reinvent themselves into first-time purpose-driven entrepreneurs. I teach entrepreneurship at the University of Pennsylvania, and I'm the author of the book, The Journey to Reinvention, How to Build a Life Aligned with Your Values, Passions, and Purpose. I'm excited to be joined by Michael Glassock, a careers and confidence coach at University of Essex. Michael holds a deep passion for helping people to gain self-awareness and take action on creating and following their own path. After experiencing an awakening in his mid-20s, Michael left a 6-year career in the health and social services industry, and he is now a coach, speaker, podcast host for those wanting to change careers, unleash their potential, and embrace a life full of purpose and fulfillment. Totally my kind of guy. Michael believes that the more people thrive in their careers and wider lives, the more compassionate and caring the world becomes. I really like this part about your bio, by the way. This last statement is something that drives me as well. Thank you so much, Michael, for being on the show.
Absolutely, and thanks for your time, Roger. And apologies, no doubt it was my mistake. But yes, I'm a careers officer at the University of Essex, but a career and confidence coach in my own practice. So not a career and confidence coach at the University of Essex. Just to clarify. But
got it.
Yeah. But as you said, that speaks a lot to the why statement that people, no doubt you and your listeners, will be aware of in terms of Simon Sinek. And I suppose that's my own personal why statement. Often I just share the initial part of inspiring people to do what inspires them. But truthfully, that is the full thing, because ultimately, if we think about all those, and I'm always naughty, but we think about those receptionists who don't want to be there and they might give people a hard time and all the rest of it. I think if you can allow someone to be in a state which they operate more in their zone of genius on a more consistent basis, the ripple effect that then has to their family, their friends, and everyone else, there might just be just a little bit less anger and fear in the world if we could move a few more people in that zone. So absolutely.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, I actually talked a little bit about this in my book. When I talk about the journey to reinvention, what I mean is a life that we're constantly iterating and aligning with our evolving values, passions, and purpose. And one of the consequences, the positive consequences of that, is that when life's up and downs happen, we can enjoy the ups, but we can also weather and appreciate the downs. The downs are not as devastating, which of course, those are the moments where we might be at our worst. But if our worst is not too bad because we're able to find a way through that, we could still be nice to people, we could still be kind, we could still be who we are, then yeah, this is why that statement, that last line totally resonated with what I believe as well. And it's a big part of why I do the work that I do. So let's dive into your career, because I want to tap into, we're going to talk a little bit about just your area of expertise, which is similar to mine. So I feel like, we could have probably like a 3-hour chat about this. We're going to do our best to keep it to an hour here. I promise listeners, it'll be an hour. Just before they say, oh no, 3 hours, I'm not doing this. Yeah, don't switch off just yet. We're good. We're going to keep it to an hour. But let's start with the beginning of your career. I noticed, when I did a little research on you, you worked for a few financial services companies or those types of companies, and you had some short-term roles in that before you eventually got into the health and social care space. Tell us a little bit about that, those first couple of roles and how that eventually led you into health and social care.
Absolutely. So, I suppose to be candid and honest, as I always try to be, being, a second generation immigrant. So my mum is Jamaican, my dad is English, born in East London, in Hackney, in London. So we very much came from kind of a working class background, and kind of hard work was a given. Like that's just the default. Everything else you can do, but there's no kind of change in or no things you can say that doesn't replace hard work in my household and family. But a big piece around that, especially coming from a second generation immigrant background, is chasing financial security and financial stability. So we often don't think about it, and I'm quite blessed in my life that I can truthfully really have a life that's built around kind of passions and stuff like that, and doing things that ultimately make me tick and kind of give me energy. But the generation before me was very much built on a generation of stability, and let's get food on the table. And then once we have that kind of, Maslow hierarchy of needs per se, we can then look outwards. So for me, that still rubbed off for me in my early years. I chased kind of financial security. That's one of the main reasons why I got into kind of business. And actually, I started doing an accounting and finance degree in my early years. And it's only with hindsight that in my second year, I actually swapped to business management because of my kind of fascination with people. Obviously, I didn't know at the time and I didn't twig, but that was the early signs as I kind of look back in terms of my career. And like I said, I still didn't twig. I went into financial kind of companies. My second role was actually in accounting. That was one of the things I was quite good at. Didn't particularly enjoy, and I soon found that out. And like I often share with people around their careers, I didn't necessarily know if that was the right career for me, but it gave me massive learning and information, especially in the world of business. I could almost disregard 20% of jobs like that once I had that accounting internship. So that allowed me to go from a path that was, miles wide to a little bit of a shorter or a less breadth in terms of a path. Yeah. And from there, I fell into the NHS, and of course, the rest is history. But that was really the early years of me kind of chucking things at the wall and seeing what sticks. And from there, evolving and iterating my career to where I am now, I'd say.
Okay. So tell me a little bit more about getting into the NHS. How did that particular opportunity? And the reason why I'm highlighting this one is because you spent about 6 to 7 years in this one. And then whereas the other ones were much shorter term. So something happened here where you stuck with this one for a little bit longer. Tell us a little bit more about that particular journey, your time at the NHS.
Yeah, absolutely. So the NHS, for those who don't know, is a national health service, of course, based in the UK, and it's free at the point of entry, one of the kind of crown and the jewels in the UK system. Whether it's funded enough is another question. That's a political argument that we won't go into today. Yeah. But for what it stands for, I think it's an absolute jewel that helps people who can't afford healthcare, I suppose, have it. So that's quite a big, I suppose, differentiation in the UK. So in terms of that service, I fell into it. It was a graduate scheme, which very much appealed to me. That's the kind of golden words as a youngster when you hear graduate scheme. You often think lots of experience, lots of opportunities, and a fair good salary alongside that. And from there, what really suited me, and especially the more I know myself now, around the love of variety I managed to do rotations in 4 different departments. So kind of comms, marketing, project management, business development. Ultimately, really had a bit of a love with project management. Very quickly realised that actually the sole mission of the NHS is to serve a purpose wider than you. No doubt it's no surprise, I suppose, to see myself in the coaching world, because it's very much a shared link in terms of the mission. And from there, I think it just kind of grown and grown, really. I was given, opportunities basically every year to kind of progress and do new things. I have to take accountability myself. I put some hard work in as well. But it just gave me masses of opportunities to learn, masses of opportunities to actually support people. And near the latter end of my career, I was helping support projects that affected, quite frankly, thousands of patients' lives all across my county. No doubt, there was a team. It wasn't just myself. But to have that opportunity, to have that impact was really important to me. And then, I can go into detail about how it started to tail off. But I'd say those are some of the big reasons for why I stick around, I suppose, and why I stayed there for so long, and why I still love the NHS and what it stands for. I think it's a tremendous institution. I think it could do so much more. But it gave me, it ultimately allowed me to build the foundation around my career and build kind of some of the key skills that I utilise today, I would say, Roger.
Mm-hmm. A couple of things that stand out about your story. Well, first of all, I mean, there's so many similarities between my story and yours in terms of our upbringing. My parents were immigrants as well. So everything you said, spot on. And so, of course, my major in university was finance and international business, because that's where the money is, right? So let's attack that right out of the gates. Let's go for that. And then, I ended up not going right into finance, but I found the job similar to yours with a rotational opportunity. I figured this will be a great way to move on up quickly,
Yep.
fast path up. And I had same kind of ideas. So I totally hear you and feel you on a lot of the story. Let's talk a little bit about, you launched a startup while you were at the NHS. I noticed that there was a startup that overlaps just a little bit towards the end of your time at the NHS. Tell me a little bit about that, because I mean, you're working a full-time job. You're basically in corporate, essentially,
Yep.
even though it's government,
Yep.
but you're in corporate,
Yep.
and you're going through this organization. You're a full-time employee, and then what happened? Tell me about this entrepreneurial bug, or what happened where you decided, hey, I want to co-found the company, and then you went and did something about it.
Yes, yeah. So there's a couple. I suppose, startups. So there's one which I think you might be referencing in terms of Nodes, which is kind of in the art industry, as well
Yep.
as obviously then starting my coaching practice. So
Yeah.
I
Nodes
can
is the
speak.
one.
Nodes is the one, perfect. So I
Yeah.
can speak a little bit about Nodes. Nodes started where a good friend of mine, who I met actually at the first site, which was that when I did my accounting internship, went to move on to work at an organisation called the Tate, which is quite a prestigious organisation in the art industry and art world. And he had a bit of a startup himself that he was working on, that's struggling in terms of the logistical side and the operational side. And at the time, when I was a project manager, those who have done a DISC assessment, so that's
Yeah.
your kind of four colours in a circle, your blue, green, yellow, red. I was very much like a blue green, so I was very analytical, very logical, and you'll hear the words "I was." We'll touch on that in a bit, but that was my mask when I was in that environment. I was very logical, very
Yeah.
analytical because I had to be. So I supported him in terms of taking that to the next level, which kind of culminated in a few shows. One actually just opposite Tate in Pimlico at the University of Arts London, and that was really, really amazing project, really an amazing kind of company to kind of allow him to further his dream to a certain extent, raise his profile, raise his reputation, allow me to really start to utilise some of my coaching skills. So I was very much there in a coaching capacity as well as a head of operations capacity with my kind of project manager hat on.
Yep.
And that was actually the first kind of, apart from the first site, was my first kind of steps into the art industry. I was very much, I giggle, I very much was a builder mindset when it comes to art. And I mean that by, no disrespect to any builders, I have many friends who are, but you kind of look at a piece of art, especially contemporary art, and you think, crikey, what's all this nonsense? It's selling for millions of pounds. I can't see a tree. I can't even make this picture out. So I was very much basic in my understanding of the art. It hasn't improved much, I can tell you now. But what it did do, and what I did a session with some young people at the Tate the other day. It made me realise actually it's often one of the most underfunded pieces, industries, unfortunately. But it's one of the circuit breakers for many people's lives. You could be thinking a whole array of emotions, both positive or negative, and you can come across a person's work. It doesn't have to be visual art. It can be, whether it's videos, whether it's music, whatever creative field it is. And that can completely take you out of that space in a second. And for those hours or for those minutes as you're viewing that piece that someone's created for you, it can completely transform your mind to a different place. Now, there's some parallels to coaching, no doubt there, but that's where I see
Yep.
the power in terms of the creative industry. And thankfully, I'm now an associate coach at another organisation called Kerry Hand, which helps artists and practices. So I've still got that love to support that industry, although it's underfunded as it is, because I think they serve a really important purpose in society in terms of being the circuit breaker for a lot of people, no matter what they've gone through.
Was this your first experience with entrepreneurship?
I would say formally, yes. Yeah, formally,
Yeah.
yes, for sure. As you well know, there's more and more we're getting kind of savvy to the entrepreneur and intrapreneur as well in terms of that subtle difference, which I think especially in the NHS world, I got to have more and more remit in terms of doing things a little bit outside the box. But I think in a more formal capacity, and until I ran my coaching business, I said to my parents and friends and family often, I've always wanted to run a business, I just don't know what. So I always knew I would want to run a business, I just didn't know what the idea may be. And
Yeah.
then when I came across the world of coaching, I very, very quickly realised that I suppose that is my zone of genius. And there's another
Hmm.
book called The Unfair Advantage by a chap called Hassan Kuba, and another person, he co-founded the book. And it talks
Hmm.
about just that. What are your unfair advantages in life?
Yeah.
And as I started to unravel that and do some of the exercises, I saw this kind of coaching wasn't necessarily just a thing for me to jump on in terms of a train, how it's booming. It ultimately, in terms of values, in terms of my skill set, in terms of the things I ultimately want to do, it complemented a lot of those things, and hence I finally found that nice nucleus between running a
Yeah.
business but actually having the idea I want to run with.
So we're going to talk more about the business because there are a few specific questions I have about that. But going back to Node, the first business, can you tell me a little bit about how that external entrepreneurship, because you mentioned, you made that distinction between intrapreneurship and
Yeah.
entrepreneurship. So how did that more formal entrepreneurship experience feel? Like what was that experience like? The beginning of it, what was good about it, what was not good about it, what did you learn, anything that stood
Yeah.
out as you were starting to experience this thing, because you did it while you had your day job. So this obviously took an investment of your time outside of your day job,
Yeah.
and so clearly that was an intentional decision, and something you committed to. Tell us a little bit about that experience, those first experiences in the more formal entrepreneurship world.
Absolutely, and with your niche in mind, I suppose, in terms of parents in that corporate world and looking to make their own steps, I suppose, and having that fear about the
Hmm.
unknown, I think what I would say, everyone has their own path and their own story. For me, it was truly liberating. It was absolutely
Mm.
liberating, and I think after a while, and I often said to my partner, now my wife, that I think I'm starting to get to the point where I want to manage myself. And I kept
Hmm.
saying that a couple of times. I said, I think I'm getting to the point where I know my self worth, I know my value, but
Yep.
ultimately I know my creative kind of freedom is starting to be hemmed in a little bit about in terms of the environment I was in. And I felt
Hmm.
like the whole experience, initial experience for me, was incredibly liberating and made me realise that this most definitely is a path that I want to follow. And so that was the kind of biggest thing for me. It was more of an
Yeah.
affirmation in terms of this is the right path for me. What
Hmm.
is the right idea? That would took obviously a couple of years to kind of fall upon.
Yep.
But for me as well, it's not necessarily as a project manager and still have that kind of logical skill set in my mind now, although I've switched in terms of the disc. As you said, right at the beginning, values and passions and interests can
Yeah.
evolve. So can disc profiles. I'm now a green
Yep.
yellow or a yellow green. So I think at the time it made me realise one, I like autonomy and freedom, and that speaks to my kind of current values that I hold. I think two, I like to be in an element of control and in charge, and I don't like. I think that links to that freedom, autonomy in terms of having my vision kind of spoken loudly and allow the other people as a team to kind of work towards a joint vision and purpose, as opposed to being kind of told what to do. And I think that some
Yep.
people, especially your listeners, I think could probably resonate with that feeling to a certain degree after working
Hmm.
5-10 years in the corporate industry in a corporate career.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it made me realise just actually it wasn't as risky as I first thought. Obviously, I balanced it. I did a bit of a calculated decision
Yeah.
alongside my day job. Equally, I'm in a similar situation with my coaching practice, so I run that alongside a role at the university, and no doubt
Hmm.
we're going to come on to. So I'm
Yep.
very clever, I would say, in terms of taking calculated risks, in terms of having
Yeah.
emergency funds financially, so that you can
Hmm.
ultimately bring yourself to a place of abundance rather than operating from a place of scarcity. Now, there are two
Yeah.
schools of thought there. I'll just quickly say, Roger, is if
Hmm.
you don't have a plan B, sometimes you go all out, and I recognise that. Whereas I recognise how I think. If I have a comfort blanket in terms of emergency fund, securities elsewhere, that actually allows me to double down on my pursuit and my pathway. So ultimately, to
Hmm.
your listeners, is to find out what's right for them and then take the
Yeah.
according steps.
Yeah. One of the things I talk a lot about is building a reinvention runway, which is essentially a financial
Mm.
runway, making
Yeah,
sure that you decide what that is for you. My personal recommendation is usually 10 to 12 months.
Yeah.
because I feel like if there, it covers a lot of circumstances, especially with families and all of that. And so I feel like even though people say, oh, you should have 3 months of emergency fund, I'm the person who's like, well, I'll do 6 just to play it safe. And if I'm doing a reinvention, I'll do 10 to 12
Yeah. Yeah.
for that. So in addition to an emergency fund, because I just
Yeah.
want to play it really safe.
Yeah.
And so, but there's this other thing that I've noticed. And maybe this plays, this aligns with what you're saying about, then going all in or doubling down on that. When you have that runway, I talk about how, you really got to use that entire runway, because I compare it to your, lift off, an airplane lifting off, and the airplane needs the entire runway to lift off. It can't just like take off after, a couple of seconds. It really needs the whole runway to, generate lift and then boom, take off and really get up in the air. And so one of the mistakes I made early on was I thought I had to accelerate like really, really fast at the beginning. And even though I had the runway, I didn't allow myself the full benefit of the runway. I thought if I can get this done in 3 months instead of 10, well, wouldn't that be better? Right. And I learned, no, it is not better, because in 3 months, there's not a lot you can really get done meaningfully, like in a sustainable kind of way. You might get a few short-term wins, but none of those will pay off in the next, 10 to 12 and 15 and beyond months. And so all of a sudden you're like, oh, I should have planted some seeds. And that's where, I learned the lesson the hard way, that you really got to use a whole runway. And so hearing you talk about how, like, when you have that cushion, that financial safety net, then go all in, go all in and use it. And I totally agree with that. Let's talk a little bit about you're working with your friend, co-founding and co-running this organization called Node. You've got cool events going on. You're learning about entrepreneurship. You've discovered that I like this idea of entrepreneurship, having my own business. This is just not my idea. This is not the idea, but this is a great experience to help me confirm that this is something that I could definitely get into. And then you're at the NHS and we're coming to the end of your time there. I noticed that when you left the NHS, the very next month, you started at the university as the careers officer. And so, tell us a little bit about that planning, that build up to the transition. And where I want you to start is the inspiration for this particular topic of career coaching.
Absolutely. So what is kind of, just very quickly, I suppose, as well, in terms of your runway analogy, you could say the same with farming. If you were to like have a massive good farm, and you had a really good roost one year, and you were to cash in everything, whether it's farming of animals or whatever it may be, and you cashed in kind of too much, I suppose, you kind of have massive profits in 1 year, but then you almost overextend yourself, so the next year you've got nothing left. And when you have a bad harvest, all of a sudden you're scratching at the end of a bucket. So it's that sustainable, taking off that sustainable growth, like you said, and having grown seeds, so that you don't just have one income stream and you cash it all in. What happens when that income stream dries up and then you're thinking, crikey, I don't know what else to do, as opposed to having 4 or 5, almost a portfolio career, but a portfolio career in terms of income streams, where when one kind of tap shuts off, or where's a adverse effect in the industry or the environment, at least you have other places to kind of look to and be more resourceful. So I just to second your point, I think you're bang on in terms of that runway. So for me, in terms of this transition, and this is one of the key bits that I help other people with now in terms of careers, so both helping develop them grow in their careers, or understand whether they're in the right place and equally to transition elsewhere. So it's having that conversation. And more often than not, you will find people that I speak to actually stay in their career or just go to a slightly adjacent role. So it's not all about grabbing people and making them leave. But how that nucleus, I suppose, started was for a real kind of mix of things. So as I was starting to come to 5 or so years of the NHS, about a couple of years ago now, my dad had me quite late in life, and unfortunately he actually, just before Christmas, he received diagnosis of Alzheimer's himself, which I'm an only child. So for me, I can't even start to describe the impact that personally had on myself and my family. Overnight almost, and it's not quite overnight, but what was quite interesting is once the diagnosis was confirmed, especially to my father, actually we noticed behaviours changed quite a lot and got made even worse. And we almost, the things that we maybe didn't want to see, we did then see. So almost overnight, over a period of a month, I became more carer in terms of capacity and supporting my
Yeah.
mum. And it did do one key thing. And I still obviously process it to this day. But one thing it did teach me is just how sacred life is. Now, we have this mantra of live life like it's our last day. Now, I don't quite subscribe to that extent, but there is nuance to that approach, and I do think life is sacred. And I think more and more we kind of take things for granted. Even waking up each day, I think we take things for granted, you know.
Yeah.
So that was a massive impact for me to make me really realise how do I want to spend the remaining of my days. You know, my dad was still only in his early 70s, and with the health and the science we have, people are living long into their 80s and even 90s now. It's very common.
Yeah.
So I realised to myself, I could continue down the path I was on, and who's to say this would happen? But in my humble opinion, say in 5 or so years, no doubt I think I would have continued to progress, to be into more of a senior management position. And no doubt after a period of time, I could have seen myself in some sort of NHS director role, earning good money, doing lots of transformation projects, but not necessarily being happy with where I am. And the reason why, amongst the other things, I could see myself getting into more and more rooms, talking more and more language in terms of buzzwords and all, oh, we should do this and this KPI, and losing more and more the connection to ultimately why I love the NHS about serving people and serving a wider purpose. Now, don't get me wrong, that might appeal to some, it just didn't appeal to me. I like to see the impact I have more closely, rather than that kind of further appeal from a more strategic point of view. Now, from there, that's still a bit of a gap to where we are now.
Yeah.
So I had that realization, but then, like most people, you might say a profanity or two, and then you might say, now what? Now what do I do? And that's almost the most scary thing. And there's the mantra I often say, Roger, about, you know, people prefer certain misery rather than the uncertainty of life. People would prefer their Monday to Friday. Maybe they get to work from home on a Friday. They live for the weekend. They have some drinks with their mates, and they just numb themselves and do it on rinse and repeat, rather than taking a risk in life and actually doing what they love or what interests them. So for me, after that, that put me a bit of into a spiral. I already liked podcasts and reading, but I really intensified my kind of podcasts and books I read. And ultimately, I fell upon a podcast called The Diary of the CEO, which is by a chap called Stephen Bartlett, which is incredibly funny because when I first said this, people said, who? Whereas when I say it, everyone smiles at me because every single man and his dog knows who Stephen Bartlett is now. But he did one of his early episodes he did with a chap called Jordan Peterson, who again is risen in profile, so a Canadian clinical psychologist. And he talked very much about self-awareness and I suppose that kind of discovering our own self-path. There was a mention of coaching, and from there I read into coaching, I looked up to it, I did some webinars, read some books, and it was just that little piecemeal, just get little breadcrumbs, I suppose, taking actions every single week, which culminated in a short coaching course, which ultimately culminated into a big coaching course, recognised by the International Coaching Federation, the ICF, probably the biggest founding pillar of coaching. Because I often don't do things by half, Roger. I like to do them properly. I don't want to just call myself a coach. I want to make sure I've done the formalised training under it. And along that whole period, I suppose, there was so many times that made me realise this is the path for me. I can reflect on my NHS career, helping people who are under me. So an administrator who hated their job, helped them become a nurse. And now they're doing their nursing degree, and that was probably the biggest thing I enjoyed the most. No matter how many numbers I made from red to green, helping that individual change their career and stay in the company. And when I did my very first coaching paid client, I ended the call, and this is the God's truth. I shed a tear. I walked down to my partner, and I said, I have to do this for the rest of my life, because there is. You will probably know this, and maybe others who are in coaching spaces will have this as well. There's no words to describe the energy and the feeling it gives you when you see that little light bulb go off in someone's mind. And for me, that like the flow of energy that appears in that place, not to get too hippie or anything like that, but how you can change someone's path in an instant is truly magical for me. So that was the biggest reason why I pivoted ultimately.
Yeah, I hear that. I call it when I crack someone open. That's what I use. I go, oh, I cracked them open real good today, and then you see that breakthrough, and you're like, that's it right there, and that's like the moment I end the session. I'm like, we're done. You need to get to work now because
Yeah.
we're not wasting this breakthrough on a conversation with me now. It's time for you to like, let's pick up an action or two and get the heck off the phone here. Get the heck off the call. I need you to get to work. Use the rest of this session because I know you blocked it off to work
Yeah.
on this thing. But yeah, I totally hear you. That feeling is, I mean, there's not a lot that matches that feeling,
No.
and yeah, that's a big part of the reason why I do it as well. So I totally get you there. I love it. I love how, and I appreciate you sharing even like these minor moments, but that were major in impact, such as, listening to the right podcast with the right guest and who said the right thing that then piqued your interest and you then took an action on that. And see, that's the key right there. And I want listeners to hear that this is not just about timing. This is also about very intentional action, because you could have listened to what he said about that brief mention of coaching and you could have just left it there. You could have said, oh, that sounds interesting, and then just listened to the rest of the episode and moved on with your day. But you decided, let me look that up. You read a few books, you looked into some trainings, you got involved, and well, the rest is history. And here we are, and you discovered something that really matters to you. You discovered your idea. You mentioned earlier when you started that, when you worked on that first startup, you liked the idea of startups, you liked the idea of entrepreneurship, but that wasn't the idea that you wanted to do. And now you're like, oh my gosh, I think I found that idea. I think I found that thing that I really love. So, another thing that I wanted to talk about with respect. So actually, let's talk a little bit about the role at Essex University. So how did you get into Essex University? Because you what I think you did, and you'll clarify this in a moment, is you engineered a really great transition from, the NHS into this role at Essex University.
Absolutely, yeah. So you're spot on there, Roger, I suppose. So when I had that realization and did more and more coaching, that's when my kind of coaching practice was kind of born and started to grow. Very much started doing kind of reciprocal or pro bono coaching to people to build a repetition and build kind of a practice. And through that practice and getting loads of good testimonials from people, I realized, okay, I might not just enjoy this, I might be actually quite good at this. I kind of started to grow from there. And kind of through word of mouth. I mean, Rich Lichfin is someone who's well known in the coaching space, and he ultimately says, what's your marketing strategy? And he says, serve one person really, really bloody well. Just serve them so well in that coaching practice, and it might not take, it might take time, it might take longer than you wish, but that person will ultimately share the results and the feelings they had with people. As soon as they have someone else who comes across similar situations, and they will look to you and go, oh, Roger, how did you move past that? And they go, well, actually, I actually had a coach and I spoke to someone, and all of a sudden it blossoms and it grows. And my first kind of corporate, I suppose, gig per se, literally happened from there. I coached someone really, really well, and then they said, by the way, could you do this but for group coach? And I said, absolutely. And then it kind of grew from there, and then that's what gave me my first corporate client. But from that coaching practice, I very quickly realised that this is not a space I want to occupy. I did have conversations in my kind of current employment to say, I think this could really serve people in terms of kind of empowering the next generation, in terms of managers. We've seen just clearly how many coaches are kind of brought into managers to help with kind of corporates and managing teams, and the massive impacts that can have, both personally, emotionally, and also financially, of course. But for whatever reason, that kind of wasn't agreed upon, and I don't think there was perhaps at the time a bit of a coaching approach and an understanding of coaching, which is perfectly fine. And then, again, another action to what you said, Roger, I could have done two things. I could have said, right, I'll just sit here, I'll just grow my practice, and I can either moan about it, or I can do something about it. And if you haven't kind of got the gist by now, I often do things. So I thought, okay, that's fair enough. Yeah. I did my research. I looked at careers that are as similar as possible to coaching and allowed you to use coaching skills on a more kind of daily basis. Came across the world of careers officers. I then jumped onto the world of LinkedIn, found people that were in that field, had Zoom conversations with them. They connected me to other people, had Zoom conversations with them. They looked at my CV. We spoke around careers officers, found a job that by fate came up at the University of Essex, where I first studied and where I met my wife. So I do
Wow.
believe in fate. Exactly. There's a few coincidences there
Yeah.
to say the least. And then applied at the University of Essex where I work now. And my interview, and it's quite interesting. When I got asked the question. Usually, you get asked a question around motivation. Why are you here?
Hmm.
Why are you applying for this role? And my answer was something along the lines of, "You're not just another notch or badge on my CV. You are an opportunity for me to be my authentic self. I've done this coaching practice. I've spent my
Yeah.
own money on coaching qualifications. I am leaving, all transparency, a higher paid job and a higher paid
Hmm.
role to do this because this is an opportunity for me to be my authentic self. I met
Yeah.
my wife here. I'm coming full circle back to this university, and I would love to help support your students in their future careers." And yes, you could be going, "All right, Michael, that's a bit cheesy, lad. It's a bit too much, okay?" But like, obviously, I got feedback that obviously that smashed it out of the park, and they truly could see
Yeah.
through me. They could see that what I was saying was true, and it again speaks to
Yeah.
my value of integrity. And the rest is history. I'm there. I get to kind of talk to grads and post grads around their careers. What I
Hmm.
do very much love is I get to bring a sense of reality because I've been there in the real
Yeah.
world for 6 7 years. I've recruited
Yeah.
CEOs, non-executive
Hmm.
directors, administrators, and then I get to
Yep.
talk to them about mock interviews and do it with a sense of reality. So that's a really
Yeah.
good space for me now, which gives me energy and
Yep.
equally complements my coaching practice because it does a lot of stuff around functional recruitment, which is
Yeah.
now your CVs, your cover letters, your interviews, more the
Hmm.
technicality, the technical skills. So I not
Hmm.
can only help people with the mindset piece, which I would argue is the biggest piece, but then once they understand their path and they move past that identity, I can then actually help them
Yeah.
secure the role with functional recruitment.
I love that, and I love that conversation that you had at that interview. What you said, that yeah, that's a mic drop moment. It's just like, hey, there it is. You know what? You better offer me this position right now, or someone else is gonna get me. I'll go down the street to the other university. I'll go now. I promise you, and I'll say this again, and you'll see. No, I love it. That is awesome. I can appreciate this on a bonus level because I had a man. I keep finding similarities. I'm like wondering, do we know each other? Like, did I like, are we like some sort of soul brothers or something? I don't know what's going on here. But when I learned coaching and I started moving in that direction, one of the things that I realized, like you, was I need practice, right? I need a place where I can get that steady practice and really develop those skills. And for me, it was teaching math, tutoring math initially. And tutoring math, what I figured out was that as I was learning in my I was taking a master's program in psychology focused on executive coaching. And I decided, all right, I need to practice on somebody. And I had all these math students I was teaching. And so I decided, you know what? These math students are old enough to be adolescents. And technically, a lot of the psychology that we're learning for executive coaching is grounded in the assumption that you have to be at least close enough to an adolescent. So I'm like, all right, that's good enough. I think that's almost an adult. So this should theoretically work. And I got to practice with them, and I needed a job. Like, I needed more consistency. And I went in for an interview with a learning center where they had a role for teaching math, and I had no math credentials. I was working at a Fortune 500 company. I sold beer coolers to Anheuser-Busch, to a beer company. And so this was nothing that was going to help me get this job. It's not like they want to hear my beer stories or anything like that. And so I'm like, all right, I got to deliver a speech. And I had my moment where
Yeah.
I wrote this cover letter inspired by Leonardo da Vinci. And I wrote about this in my book. So Da Vinci was making a pretty massive career pivot when he was about 30 years old, and he left Florence for Milan. And when
Hmm.
he went to Milan, he applied for a job as a military engineer. He had never done that. So he was like, crap, how do I do this? I got to write a killer letter. And so he wrote the greatest cover letter known to man. And it's published in a lot of books. They put that in there. But it's an incredible cover letter. When you read it and you're done reading it, you're like, oh my God, he could have dropped the feather pen that he used, or or if a mic existed, he could have dropped a mic. It was just one of those mic drop kind of,
Yeah.
writings where you're just like, wow, did he just write that? And he wrote this to the Duke of Milan. That guy was like kind of a badass. And, it was a little scary too. So if you're going to write something like that, you better be able to back it up. And it was just, he was so bold, and he was so upfront, so authentic, so him. And how do you not give this person an opportunity? How do you not make an offer after this? Exactly. And so hearing your story, I immediately thought, oh, that was his Da Vinci cover letter moment. That was, you did it in the form of a speech and an interview, and boom, like, it's like, how do we not connect with that? And the reason why I'm focusing on this is because when I talk about reinvention, often we're talking about people who are making a massive leap from one domain to another. So it's just very different, right? It's not that adjacent of a move. It's a very big leap that you're taking. So naturally you feel like, why would anybody give me a shot? And what I always share with people is, and now I will add your story to the mix, are stories like yours. Yeah. Because I go, look, at the end of the day, you're speaking to humans. And if you are honest and you are pure and you really actually care about this, and you just put your all into that conversation, into that interview, into that letter, into that whatever a video pitch, whatever it is, I promise you're going to move a human. It may not be the first one, may not be the second one, but someone is going to respond, and they're going to do something that's a little odd. They're going to give you a chance, even though you are not the ideal candidate. You are not someone who did this role for the last 5 or 7 years. So you probably don't meet any of those requirements, but they're going to say, you know what? I don't care. I got to have Michael. Or I got to have Roger, or I got to have Leonardo. Right. Like, I got to do it. And so I tell people this is because this is the part that we can't predict. This is the part that no one can promise you. But if you go all in and you really pour everything, I love what you said. Your words, like, you should record a video where you just share that story. It's super powerful. And I will share that video to make my point when I tell people this story, because I really want people to get it. Like, it takes words like that. Yeah. And those are like the deepest, purest words that any human could have put out in an interview and said. That's not the kind of thing an interview prep person teaches you to say. That's not part of the 10 things to say at an interview. No, they don't put that in there, because you can't write that as a general tip. That only comes from the heart. So yeah, I love that story. I really hope you create a video around this.
It's a good idea. You know what? I will take that as an action. There's always signs the university's given us, so I will take that as an action. I will do that, and I will let you know once. You'll be the first person to know once I do it. But I completely agree with what you said, though, because I suppose in terms of my value of like integrity, like that really does speak to a lot of things I do. I think humans aren't silly. They will soon know if you're trying to pull the wool over their eyes, and even getting to that point. So I actually had a call. I messaged the hiring manager, and this is something I also tell a lot of people to do in terms of when we get to that functional recruitment piece, in terms of securing the job, is to try your best to talk, whether it's verbally, in terms of written communication, or via Zoom or face-to-face, with the hiring manager before you even get to the interview. So I managed to connect with the hiring manager. Goodness knows why she took my call, bless her, but it was like a couple of days before the deadline. I mean, managed to have a really quick Zoom call to discuss. And I said to her, look, this is what I've got. This is what I've done. I've done this coaching practice. I've been there, done it. I've recruited people. I've got so much kind of functional recruitment from the real world that I can bring and help your students. But this is ultimately the reason why I'm applying for this job, because I see it as an opportunity to change my path and change my journey. And when I think that person heard me, they were like, and I said to them, look, am I wasting my time? Because I don't want to waste your time, but am I wasting my time in applying for this role? And they said, I would love to see your application, Michael. And that was all the words I needed to hear to say, okay, we're gonna crack on and go ahead with this. And no doubt when that application came across the desk, that person would have been looking and saw my name and looking for my application to see if it kind of matched what they heard. And then from there, obviously, I was successful to get an interview, and the rest was history. So that connection with people, and I mentioned that book, Unfair Advantages. My three kind of, as in my current state, because no doubt things change. In my current state, I would say my unfair advantages is an insight into the NHS. So an insight, 6-7 years, you get a bit of an insight into an industry. Would be my emotional intelligence. So I'm definitely not book smart, but I'm definitely street smart. and I love connecting with people like you. I can meet strangers. A good friend once said to me, "Michael, you can talk to a rock," and I said, "I don't know if that's a compliment or not, but but that's that emotional intelligence." And the final piece, as I
Yeah.
now know through my disc and how it's changed, is my element of creativity and how I can
Hmm.
hear an idea and kind of match things and details from how it's going to affect something from now to 10 years later. And if you put
Yeah.
all that little lovely gooey nucleus into one place and you match that with my values, you can ultimately
Hmm.
see why I've come to the place I am. But it's only
Yeah.
with hindsight, and it's only with having my own coach. So I always say any coach worth their salt often has their own coach. Any therapist often has their own therapist. And it's only through that
Amen.
experience and practicing what I preach is why I'm here where I am today. Because if
Yeah.
otherwise, I wouldn't be having even half the understanding, I suppose, that I could share with you today, Roger.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you said about, any coach, who's really truly a real coach, will have a coach. There's
Yeah.
no way that they don't, eat their own dog food, if you will. That's how I like putting it. It's I mean, really, like you got to do that. And that was a mistake I made early on in my career. I graduated from my master's in psychology in 2010. That was focused on executive coaching. And it wasn't until 2015 that I hired a coach. Now, I wasn't coaching. I was working with math students from 2010 to 2015. But I was still talking about a lot about coaching. I was coaching my students, and the reason I didn't do it, which is a weird reason, but I say this just in case somebody's listening and maybe this is their reason for not doing it. I just felt like, well, I'm not sure that I'm worthy of coaching. I haven't earned that yet. Like I need to be doing something that, or have bigger problems, or I don't know what I thought, but I just didn't think that. And finally in 2014, 15, I'm like, what am I doing? I mean, first of all, how dare I ever recommend coaching to anybody if I don't have a coach? And second, I need a damn coach. I need a damn coach. They told me this in the program. They said a coach must have a coach. A coach cannot coach himself. It does
Yeah.
not work that way.
No.
And they were so right. And I got a coach, and and I've always worked with coaches since then. So I
Yeah.
totally hear you. And for any coaches listening, if something's holding you back and it's anything similar to what I just shared, it's not a good reason. It's not a good
Ab-
reason. I learned that, and
absolutely.
you deserve a coach. You totally deserve a coach.
Just on your point, I think that's the perfect point to if you're saying with your voicing, with your internalizing the words around, I don't think I'm worthy to have coaching. I would say that's the exact reason why you should get coaching. Because if you don't think you're
Exactly.
worthy for getting coaching, I could argue, but it could point to a level of self worth, a level of self understanding, I suppose a level of self awareness. And I would say that would almost be the exact reason why a coach would be amazing to open up your mind. So, there's different
Yeah.
levels, there's different accessibilities. Places will offer kind
Mhm.
of pro bono coaching. Some places are very clever where they will offer tiered coaching based on the level of experience of the coach. So it
Mhm.
is becoming more and more accessible as an industry. It's not just the CEO who pays thousands of pounds for coaching
Yeah.
now. It's a very
Yep.
accessible industry. So I kind of I prompt people to do their research. I of course have a slight bias to people who do more EMCC, AC, or
Mhm.
ICF coaching. They've had some training,
Mhm.
or even the ILM. I can only talk for
Yeah.
UK, but I know the
Mhm.
ICF and some of them are more international. At least then you
Mhm.
have a bit more understanding. They have a formal background and training in that,
Yeah.
that profession. But at the end of the day, actions speak louder than words. And if you can see the results, you can see the testimonials, and they're free to share
Mhm.
that. That will hopefully give you a bit of confidence to kind of get your coach yourself, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about your coaching business. So now you're at Essex University.
Hmm.
You delivered that just masterful speech, that just mic drop moment. They're like, dude, sign here. Let's go. Let's rock. Let's not even waste another minute. So now you're in. Tell us where was this? Where was? I mean, you were already coaching while you were at the NHS, but now I guess you're probably like, all right, I'm in full on coach mode. I've let go of my NHS role,
Yeah.
which was different than
Yep.
coaching, wasn't fully coaching. So now you're like, now I'm free to really go all in on my own business. Tell us a little bit about that journey,
Yeah.
going all in on your business. Your focus for customers, all of that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's all in on me. That's what it is. When you say all in on my business, it's all in on me.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't have a single bad word about the NHS. I think it's an amazing institution. I think it's one of the jewels of the crown of the UK. I think it could be even better, if funded enough and all the rest of it. But I just
Yeah.
realised it wasn't the right place for me at that time. Our lives, our journeys evolve. Whereas now I'm in a place where I can be authentically me. And
Yeah.
you don't know how freeing that can be for someone. I suppose my actions speak louder than my words in terms of just how I approach and how you see the joy, I suppose, coming out of myself now, because I don't have the Sunday scaries anymore. And a lot of people
Yeah.
will say, what is success? What's your definition of success? And obviously, that can apply to various remits of life. But if we were just to focus on the career aspect, definition of my success is to not have Sunday scaries, to have Sunday
Yeah.
afternoon and look forward to work on a Monday. Obviously there's a balance, there's cost of living, we have to afford things, but to have
Yeah.
that and to look forward to work is massive. And then
Yeah.
allows me to have energy to do all the things I'm doing now. So for me, the main way I try to share my message is equally through kind of speaking to people like yourself who have that shared vision, that shared love of kind of helping a purpose wider than themselves. I also do it through my own kind of podcast, and I like to almost dig into key industries. So I often think about two people when I do my podcast. Obviously, yours clearly around that the parents in corporate and looking to take their entrepreneurial journey, which I think is amazing. And the people I often focus on is two. One, the 16-year-old who's just finished education and has no idea what to do, and then they can
Yeah.
utilize my podcast as a free resource to allow them to take those first steps. And secondly, the person, no doubt, who's in their 30s or so, maybe, who's done their career for 5, 10 years, often might even be older in their 40s, and is also looking to pivot or grow in their career. They're having a bit of
Yeah.
a, do I grow? Do I develop? Do I pivot? I'm not sure what to do. And
Hmm.
that's why I often focus on specific careers. So I have doctors, business analysts, teachers. I'm going to have someone in the legal world, lawyers, because it's hard to aspire and do something that you don't even know exists or understand. And for instance, if you're a project manager, you could very easily become a business analyst. They
Yeah.
might use slightly different technology, but the skills are so common and often the same. So for me, the coaching practice I do now is all focusing about people to grow and either transition in their careers. I often do a lot of work with the NHS, so anybody in the health and social care sector. But equally, I find I work with people all around public services. So it could be people in the industry of the arts, so creating their own art practice. It could be people even in the military. I've helped so many people in terms of ex kind of military leavers to transition into civistry and get their first civilian job. So if I can do anything to help smooth that journey, sometimes they realise actually they're in the right place. They just need to go elsewhere or a different department or different career. Or if they realise actually the time is for me to take a leap and transition into something else, that's the journey I support them on.
One thing that stood out for me, which and it goes back to something you said earlier when you were referring to your certification, your training, and which says a lot about how serious you take this field and this profession. I noticed in your timeline that I think your certificates came through around 2022, but you had started this journey a few years before that. And so can you walk us through the journey to making the decision, to pursue some of those those certifications and getting that training? And I'm going to give you a little context for why I'm asking this, because given how this conversation is going, I know you'll use this context to really craft your answer nicely. So I think what I'm trying to get to is there are a lot of times where I'm working with people who are thinking about some sort of reinvention, and often the assumption, like right out of the gates, is that, well, I got to get all the certificates first, or I got to get a new degree, or I got to get a master's in this, or I got to do whatever. And I always say, and here in the US, getting another degree is getting any degree is expensive. Getting another one is also very expensive. You could go back for an executive master's, and that might set you back about $90,000. So pretty pricey endeavor if you're not sure that this is the path you want to take in life. Because if it's not, you're now 90K in debt that you didn't have before. So to that end, I often tell people that all of those things don't have to happen in order for you to even attempt this interest. And I don't know, it seems like in your case, you first tested this out and then started to pursue, as you started to, I guess, confirm that this is your zone of genius. You really doubled down on that and said, all right, let's let's become lethally good at this, is what I call it, when you're deciding to take maybe some of your innate talents and make them like, you can put them on repeat and guarantee them all the time. So walk us through that journey. Walk us through that journey to where you're like, I'm becoming a coach, and then also where the training, the certification, all of that fits in.
Absolutely. So there's something that speaks a lot to this, and it's something I try and do with everything in life. When you look at anyone who's deemed successful, and I do my little fingers as successful in terms of what society deems success as. I've already talked about defining your own definition of success, but some of the common traits for me, and something that I try to embody, is a level of consistency and a level of curiosity. And if I embody, and it's not sexy, and I did a post about this the other day, it's not the most sexy thing because it's all about quick cash and get rich quick and all the rest of it in the modern day. But for me, I adopt, and I can look back and I can truthfully hand on heart say, I always adopted a level of curiosity. I was always that annoying person asking a question, and I still am to this day, and always interested just to see, even if someone has a different kind of point of view to me, how they've come to that place. But equally, and I think you also touched upon this earlier in the conversation, yes, I've had catalysts in my career, but that consistent action I've taken has allowed me to kind of bear the fruits of those opportunities. Yeah. So I did a kind of health coaching course whilst I was in the NHS, obviously to help support myself in my role. And that was also one of the very earliest formal elements of coaching training I received. And I absolutely loved it. I was like, I wish I could do this forever. And again, didn't take action. The little kind of thing changed in my mind, and I read more books at the time. So it increased my love and interest into coaching, which I didn't know existed to the extent I do now. But that was one of the kind of like another little catalyst. And I took that element of curiosity and consistency, in that area to read more books, to read more podcasts around coaching. I then volunteered to be part of an internal coaching register in terms of my organisation. So then I could do it for free. And technically, if you're going to more formal education, that would almost count as paid hours for those aspiring coaches out there now. So I got to try that with kind of my peers. From there, I then joined a coaching register for the region. And again, I got to try it with not just people that I knew, people who were complete strangers. So it's again another level of kind of testing as well. And then after that as well, I even did some volunteering roles. And this is again something I say a lot to people. Once I help understand, who you are and I suppose what your path is, and we start to now talk about my third pillar that I do with clients around how do you get there. One of the pieces of that pillar is volunteering or shadowing in terms of actually try before you buy. See if you actually enjoy the job. What's the reality like of it? And I volunteered at a few charities, a few different trusts as well to kind of broaden that horizon and constantly push myself into an uncomfortable situation. And at the end of the day, and again, another coach that I still am friends with today uses a beautiful phrase of being a loving scientist. So all this time, I'm just a loving scientist. I'm testing my hypotheses. I'm seeing what the results and outcomes are, and then I'm iterating my approach as a result. Pardon me. So for all those people, I suppose, listening, what is something you could do that would just take you 1% closer to understanding whether that is the right path for you? That might just take a little bit of the fear, a little bit of the overwhelm from you. What would just take you 1% closer? Is it reading a book? Is it reaching out to someone who's in your field? Again, something I often say is reach out to you, but 3 to 5 years ahead of you. So the careers officers, I reached out. As soon as I found the careers officers, I reached out loads of careers officers who are only 3 years into their career, and so that they could familiarise themselves with my journey, and then I could take those steps and kind of go forth. I now do that with fellow coaches. I talk to fellow coaches who are 3 to 5 years into running a full-time coaching practice. So how can you do that for your industry? And just all of those different steps I've taken, whether it's a book, whether it's reaching out to people, whether it's trying it through volunteering or shadowing, there's so many opportunities you can take to limit the risk, because I know the reality of the world we live in. But that will just give you a little bit of energy. And like my accounting example, that made me realise I don't want to do accounting. With coaching, by doing the course, it realised I want to do the coaching. So find that niche, find that area for you. You don't have to figure out your life purpose like this. It's always evolving, but can you figure out what you're interested in, and then can you act
Yeah.
accordingly?
You know, I mean, you hit the nail on the head with this question because you shared so many examples of ways from your story, ways that you were able to practice this evolving passion, this developing passion that wasn't fully fleshed out yet, but
Yeah.
you took all of these steps, different kinds, reading books. You took the health coaching course, not exactly what you eventually took later, but it was, wow, what a great starter. You read the books, you talked to other people, careers officers, whoever it took. Every little bit contributed. It moved you just a little bit along that journey to become more familiar, to become more prepared. You did the volunteer coaching. You signed up. You offered yourself, hey, can I practice here? Can I practice there? I'll do it for free. You know, I'll do it for a small fee. And you took all those steps. And that's really important because that's what I want listeners to take away. That is how you pave the road to a reinvention. It's through these experiments. It's through these projects. It's through involvement. It's just showing up. Honestly, there's not a lot. Like one thing that I've learned and is not everyone shows up to do these things. And not because they can't, not even because they won't. I think it's because we often think that we're not allowed to, that we're not allowed. Like, well, how dare I coach if I'm not the most official coach on the planet with every badge necessary to say that I'm a coach? You know, like, I mean, you can do it. I taught math in public and private schools without any math credentials, no teaching credentials, nothing. I sold my passion. I delivered another one of those speeches to a superintendent of a school who said, I'm sold. Let's do it. Like, I'm going to give you a shot. And I love what he said. He said, and I want to make one thing clear. I know that you have never done this before, and that's not why I'm hiring you. I'm hiring you. So I was like, oh, okay, good. Well, I'm glad that's out in the air then. Now it's out in the open. Because I was like, oh my, that was so like, whoo. You just put that right out there. He goes, I want you to know why I'm hiring you. I'm hiring you because of your passion.
Yeah.
He goes, I need that level of passion and energy in the classroom right now. Our math programs are struggling, and I know that I need to inject energy. I don't need to inject another teacher. I need energy. I need passion. I need somebody to fire everybody up and get them all excited again about this. And I know we'll fix our problems with that. So I was like, wow. But again, it's finding those, it's remaining open to these possibilities as you did on your journey. You asked, you found other ways. There's, Tony Robbins always talks about, the first thing you got to figure out is what and why. The how is the last thing you figure out. You'll figure out how if you know what you want and why you want it. And it's so true, because when I think back, and no doubt, your story, and I'm sure you have plenty of others, when you knew what you wanted and why you wanted it, forget about it. You're going to find a way. May not happen on the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, or seventh attempt, but eighth, ninth, 10th, hey, that's fine with me. It'll happen.
Absolutely. And that's why I suppose often one of the books I share when people get on board in terms of my coaching is I will share the book Simon Sinek Start With Why. I will share that book with them for that reason exactly. To really, obviously I will have coaching and exercises I do with them, but have also that piece in the back of their mind when they're reading in the evenings to clarify that why. Because like scales, if that why is strong enough, it will outweigh all of the how, and it will outweigh all of the time, the effort, and everything you have to do, because that's why that why is strong enough. When I speak about my why in terms of inspiring people to do what inspires them, also that why encapsulates a lot of different things. It encapsulates my values, and very briefly, I would say, like, my values are freedom. So coaching allows me to do it. I get to speak to people like you from the comfort of UK. I can. It will also, done well over 10, 15, 20 years, will afford me a level of financial stability, which is important for me for two things. One, for my children, to give them experiences in life, not for materials, but to give them cultural capital. And two, to help support my dad, no doubt, when he goes into care, and be able to support my dad and my parents financially. So that's incredibly important to me. The second one is fulfillment. I'm literally helping people, inspire them to take journeys and paths. There's not many more things that are more fulfilling for me in life. Lifelong learning. Like, I could be 80 I could be coaching half a day a week at 80 years old, and I will still learn things from my clients every single day. And it even
Yeah.
goes into my personally. I love golf because I can never be perfect. I'm always learning new things. And again, you'll see
Yeah.
how values bleed into different parts of your life. And then finally,
Yeah.
integrity. So coaching is currently, no, I don't know if that will change, but currently is an unregulated industry. And
Yeah.
integrity is incredibly important to me. There's a reason I could have
Hmm.
just called myself a coach. I've coached
Yep.
100 hours. I've got loads of testimonials. That must be enough. But I wanted to do some training. I wanted to have some real theory to go
Hmm.
with my practical experience. And
Yep.
ultimately, people are paying me and they're putting themselves in vulnerable positions. They're scared. They're fearful around
Yeah.
creating change. And I want to serve them from a place of integrity. And often
Hmm.
that's again bleeds into other parts of my life where I have a real sense of injustice with when I
Yeah.
see other things happen in the world. So those values, I suppose, are so fundamental. They're not just words or pretty pictures.
Hmm.
Like, they're not just kind of buzzwords. They
Yep.
ultimately serve as the compass and the direction for the kind of things I do in life.
I love what you said about I love all the values you shared, but what you said about integrity, specifically about this field,
Mm.
so true. I always tell people, this is, we're, we're not at the place yet where, like the American Medical Association in the United States, or,
Mm.
the American Psychology Association, or the bar for law, and all that. Like, we don't have those things in coaching. The closest we have is the ICF, and
Mm.
that's kind of it for now. It's getting there. It's a field that's getting there. But I'm very protective of the field in terms of,
Mm.
how people approach it. For me, it's like, hey, look, when I recommend people who want to get into coaching, I tell them about it. I go, one of two ways I always recommend. One is find some sort of ICF accredited program. And even those, be very selective about them,
Yeah.
because they're, some can get that accreditation, but like most things, there are universities that you're probably like,
I
well, I don't
agree.
think that's my kind of university. I don't think
Yeah,
I
yeah,
would go
I
there.
agree.
But there's others you would go. Same thing with accreditation. And then the other is through studying psychology. That's the path I took. When I did it back in 2008, coaching is obviously not, I mean, it's relatively new, right? When we think back at,
Yeah.
I'm thinking of Sir John Whitmore, who wrote the
Yeah.
book Coaching for Performance, and him and Tim Galloway were kind of just hanging out, two young punks thinking about ideas, and they were like, this coaching thing's kind of cool, like your whole thing about the inner game of tennis, that's pretty interesting. What if I did that to the executives? I don't know. What do you think I could do? And I don't know if you know this, but there's a story about the history of coaching that goes back to John Whitmore got his first kind of test client as it was IBM, and I worked for IBM, and I did coaching at
Okay.
IBM. And so IBMers didn't know this story. And I'm like, just so you know, a part of coaching history happened with this company. And
Yeah.
it happened back in the day, when they would take all the executives to do things like ski retreats for their executive like gatherings and stuff. And on one of these ski retreats, they had John Whitmore come in and do a
Wow.
thing on coaching. And
Wow.
that was one of his early experiments, where he just tested it out with a massive company. What an experiment, right? Like, to land
Yeah.
IBM as your experiment. And fast forward though, it took a couple of decades, or a few decades, and really for the positive psychology movement to really begin. And that's when coaching. And so in 2008, there weren't too many programs being advertised, but there was a master's in psychology focused on executive coaching. I didn't even, like you, I'm like, what's coaching? I don't even know what coaching is. And I started learning about it. I go,
Yeah.
huh, this sounds interesting. This sounds
Mm.
incredibly aligned with what I want to do. I,
Mm.
I used to put it this way. When I got into tutoring math and teaching math, I knew that I wanted to move away from what I was doing in sales and work with math students to unleash their potential. I believed deep down, every math student, and I still do, and I know so, that every math student has it in them to be a very good math student. Not the best necessarily. The best can be reserved for someone who actually cares about the field and wants to spend all their time in that, but not everybody does. But everyone can be good at this, because we all, this is a part of our brain that, unless you have some condition,
Yep.
we all have it. We
Yeah.
all rationalize, we use logic, we move through the day. That's math. There's variables everywhere, there's constants everywhere. And so when I got into this field, when I started getting into tutoring more, I said, I want to help people grow. That's what I want to do. And I didn't have the words. I was still looking for the words to describe it. I remember I was telling my first wife, I want to help people grow. She's like, what do you mean by that? I'm like, well, I want to help them develop. It's not like I want to help them learn necessarily, because I believe they can all learn. They don't need me to learn. But I think to grow, that's a little bit different than learning. It's a little more than learning. It's not just learning. It's learning and doing. It's believing you can learn first, or otherwise you won't even engage.
Yeah.
And I said it. I want to help people grow. I want to help humans grow. So now I'm out there looking for, okay, how do I learn to do that? I've had some early success tutoring, but I don't want to presume that this is something I can be amazing at forever. I think I have had some beginner's luck, early luck. So that's good. Let me leverage that to figure out, how do I become what I used to call and still call becoming lethal at something, where you're so lethally good that, you go 10 for 10 every time. And so I thought, how do I do that? And I decided to go back for a master's. And when I looked at the field of education, I'm reading all the curriculums. I go, none of these describe how to grow a human. They describe how to manage a classroom. They describe math, which, I mean, I know the math part already, so that's not helpful. Nothing in education actually teaches an educator how to grow a human. What the heck? That's so weird. And somebody must have mentioned to me, because I know I didn't find this by accident, to look into psychology. So I started looking at psychology roles. And then I saw this program in executive coaching. And I'm reading this, like their recipe, if you will, all the courses, everything you do. And I go, that's how you grow a human. Yeah. That is how you grow a human. That's how you help somebody move along their journey. That's how you really help somebody. And that's how I fell into this. And when I took that, for me, that was just such an incredible way of learning it. And so I always, like you, I recommend go deep, like take the accredited courses, consider the path of a master's, or, not necessarily a PhD. You don't have to go that, that deep into psychology, but you can, by the way, because a lot of the first coaches were psychologists. So that's a thing. That's totally a thing. But I love how protective you are as well of this field, and how much integrity you apply to make sure that you are at your best for your clients, that you're not just winging it. You're not just like, yeah, sure. All my friends say that I can help them with their problems. I'm like, whoa, that doesn't make you a coach. I'm just saying, that doesn't make you a coach.
Exactly.
Do you ever have people who say to you, oh, coaching? Yeah, no, that doesn't work on me, or that doesn't work for me. And then and then do you ask them about, like, tell me about your last coaching experience?
Yeah, I've had a few people who will say it in different words, for sure. And often, and it's funny, I was about to say this anyway, but this question leads into it very well. I often say, what is your understanding of coaching? That's often the first thing I say. So even like the UK, US, there's a bit of a kind of a shift between the understanding of coaching. But for me, very quickly, I suppose therapy is often focused on the past. So how does the past affect you to the present day? Coaching is often focused on the present day and focusing on your future goals, and how can we collectively, in an equal relationship, overcome those barriers. Mentorship is often still focused on the present day and focusing on the future, but is what we call an unequal relationship. And that's not to say one's better than another, but it's usually more directive, and I tell you what to do, as opposed to we have a facilitated conversation. So when I first and foremost share that, then they often say, oh, I was told what to do, or that's not my understanding of coaching. So I go, okay, great. Yeah. So now we're on a level field of understanding. And then part of me, Roger, in my brain straight away goes, challenge accepted. When I hear someone say the words, I go, challenge accepted. And then I'm like, okay. And depending on who it is, if I know them really well, I will often refer them to a friend who's a coach. Yeah. So I don't coach my immediate family and friends. That's also a bit of a thing around, so the questions don't come from a place of judgment, etc., etc. But if someone is like a colleague or peer, and I hear that, then I will say, do you fancy a conversation? And I'll make it informal as possible and less scary. You fancy a conversation sometime? We can, go to the pub, go to a place you're comfortable, wherever you want to, and we can have that conversation. And then very quickly, within 10, 15 minutes, all the barriers, all the walls kind of fall down. And we do what we do best. We have a really insightful conversation. We focus on the individual. A lot of coaching for me, it's not about the ego of the coach. It's about how do I empower
Hmm.
you. Like I love your word grow. So rather than
Yeah.
teaching someone, you're growing them, you're empowering them so that they have the
Yeah.
tools and skills so that post coaching they can then empower themselves. They're not reliant on you. They're not reliant on you as another
Yeah.
individual. No doubt they might have another area of growth they want to focus on, or they might have a big
Hmm.
change in situation. They might potentially come back to you. But
Yeah.
your ultimate goal is to empower that individual to kind of take their own steps and to grow.
Hmm.
So for me, I completely agree with what you're saying in terms of that coaching,
Yeah.
understanding. And I think for
Yeah.
me, when I see the boom of coaching, yes, some people get a bit worried because obviously that kind of attracts certain individuals, and you
Hmm.
worry about the regulation. But for me, it makes me warm and fuzzy because there's a reason why coaching is growing because of the impact and
Yes.
because of how it's helping so many individuals. And the more it
Yeah.
grows, the more accessible it is to others as well. And at the end of the day, those who are in here for the long term game, so infinite games against finite games. The point
Hmm.
infinite games, the point of the game is to keep the game going. So that's what I'm
Yeah.
doing. I'm playing long term games with long term people. At the end of the
Hmm.
day, if the industry grows, those who have a place of integrity, those who have a place of lifelong learning, and those who are in there to keep the game going, they will be the ones that will prosper, and these will be the ones that will be able to ultimately serve others.
Hmm.
So for me, I only see it as a good time, and I see it as a
Yeah.
place, as a home for, if I may say, people like yourself and me, Roger, who have our hearts set in the right place and are not there to
Yeah.
take advantage of other individuals.
Yeah, I think I'm the Michael of the U.S. Because I'm hearing you say it. I go, oh my God, that's literally what I do. Because I break that down. I used to teach executive coaching at IBM.
Hmm.
When I was there, I became a coach trainer, and we had an internal coaching program
Nice.
called Blue Core Coaching, and I became one of the trainers for it. And so I would lead a bunch of cohorts and all of that. And I would always kick off the first session with what coaching is not. And I had this slide deck that I use for everybody. Any presentation I did on coaching, I had to set that right from the beginning because I don't know who's in the room and I don't know what their understanding is. And most people think mentoring and coaching are interchangeable words. And I'm like, no, they are not interchangeable
Exactly.
words. And so I would do the same thing. I would go down teaching,
Yeah.
consulting, advising, mentoring, and then, coaching.
Yeah.
And then now I get it. I go, and now we can begin the presentation because without that, you're not in the right place. You're processing through a lens that is not correct. It's the wrong set of lenses to look at this through, and I don't want you to get this the wrong way. And so, and then that other thing, I picked up on it. You said that you won't coach friends and family. I love that because that's another thing. That's part of the ethical code of coaching. And I remember that from 2009 or 10, whenever we learned that in our
Yep.
psychology masters. And I never forgot that. For me, like the rules really stuck with me.
Yeah.
And I just thought, and I would hear coaches talk about, that coaching friends and family. And I'm just like, oh man, nah. Like I always tell them no. Like I say,
Yeah.
no, you don't want that. Like I don't want that. And I go, look, straight up, let's face it, I know too much. So how can I be objective? I know too much about you. So I'm going to ask questions based on my knowledge of you
Exactly.
and of your history and all of that, which means you'll get good questions. You just won't get the most objective questions. And you really need the most objective questions right now. You need
Yeah.
the obvious questions that I won't think to ask because I go, duh, it's obvious. I already know this. But the the right answer might be in the most obvious question. And if I can't ask you that obvious question, well, then you're at a disadvantage with me. So nah,
Exactly.
we're not doing this. Like, plus you won't want to be my friend after we do this because I can be kind of harsh. And when I get harsh, like it's easier to be harsh on someone who I don't have to worry about being friends with them. I'm like, look, it's cool if you don't like me after this. Like, I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
So
it's
I'm here to
true.
do a job.
It's true, and I think I love how you kind of made it very internal to yourself in terms of my objectiveness as a coach and stuff. And I like how you
Yeah.
did that first, but equally that
Hmm.
person, on the vice versa, that person may struggle to hear the questions, like you said, in terms of challenge, and may
Yeah.
feel the questions are coming from a place of judgment. Whereas often with
Yes.
strangers, there's a bit more of a separation. And I
Yeah.
do agree with you. What I would say, and obviously I don't coach these individuals or these friends, is that those who if I want to put a term on it in terms of best friends, are very close circle. So I have many people I am friendly with. You know, I have lots of colleagues, lots of amazing people I see internationally. But those who I call best friends, those are the ones I'm truly freely kind of honest with, to my detriment or not. And at least they know. They always know, and my partner always says this. Whenever, you know, I give flowers, I give compliments and stuff like that. But whenever I give a compliment, my wife knows I mean it. Because I don't chuck them out. I don't chuck them out like candy, I suppose. Yeah. When I give something and I say it equally to my best friend, they know if they come into me, they come into me because they want to hear the truth and they want to hear the real answer. And then those who I kind of often drift away from are those who don't want to hear the truth. Because if they come to me and I say to them, I say, do you want me to tell you the honest answer, or do you want me to tell something that's going to make you feel warm and fuzzy? And they go, no, I want the honest answer, Michael. And I go, okay. You've asked me. This is honestly my truthful opinion on it.
This is your fault at this point. Anything that happens from here on, just know that this is on you now.
It's a disclaimer,
All those disclaimers, it's like, you know what, on second thought, let's talk about the match this weekend. Let's just pivot this conversation. Be like, good, that's fair enough. Like, I totally get it. Absolutely. Michael, thank you so much for your time. This is a great conversation. I feel like I think we might have to do a conversation on coaching, just on the field of coaching. For anybody, maybe I could make it an episode dedicated to people who are thinking about a reinvention into coaching. And I feel like you and I can really just have a great conversation about this and really help someone who, you know, if we think about them as being someone who's considering this, we can really help them understand this field, because I think we just did a preview of this on this call, and I appreciate you sharing kind of going with it, even though it was a little off script and all of that. So, but thank you so much for sharing the insights, your story, your inspirations, your motivations, the ups, the downs, the pivots, the twists, the turns, because that is what helps this audience understand what it takes and what the journey can look like. Because there is no one size fits all journey, and that's why I do these interviews, because I want to hear everybody's version of how they got to where they are and how they made those transitions. And you did such a great job of engineering these opportunities. You clearly listened to yourself. You acknowledged things that you felt, and you gave them a shot. You gave them a try. Anytime your curiosity was piqued, you gave it a shot. Let me read a book. Let me schedule an interview or a conversation with somebody. Let me learn a little bit more. Very safe moves. Like, nothing scary about those moves. But when they add up, all of a sudden they become pretty bold.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I first and foremost, I absolutely love that idea about a conversation around coaching.
But yes, thank you again. Thank you again for your time. Where can where can listeners who want to learn more about you go to? I mean, we're going to have all your links, but which one do you want them for? Like, click on this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think so. Michael Glassock Coaching. If you type that in on Google, it's simply michaelglassoccoaching.com. You can book a consultation with me if you're interested in the world of coaching or want to go on your own path. But you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Instagram, Michael Glassock Coaching as well. Simply GLASSOCK. That's the surname, Glassock. And it'll be a pleasure to have a conversation with you, whether it's you're wanting to change your careers or equally if you're interested in the world of coaching. So, yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. All the links will be available in the show notes in the description. So do just take a look, beneath wherever you're listening to this. You'll find it there. All right, Michael, thank you again. Appreciate it. Thank you for listening to this episode of the School of Reinvention podcast. Again, I'm your host, Roger Osorio. If you're ready to start your journey to reinvention and want to walk the path with others, visit www.rogerosorio.com and go to the School of Reinvention to check out for yourself how a community-based coaching platform can help you begin your next reinvention. You can also go to rogerosorio.com to purchase my new book, The Journey to Reinvention, and receive some exciting bonuses. Until next time, make your day great.